What's up, beautiful people? Thank you for joining us. This is The Community. I am your host, Jacoby Holland. I am joined here with Lulu Sway, my co-host and executive producer. That music you just heard was the one and only DJ minus Oscar. We appreciate you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thanks for joining in the Zoom webinar, as well as those on YouTube. We couldn't do it without you guys. If you're on YouTube, make sure to click the subscribe and see all of the videos as they come out. For those of you in Zoom, you can use the Q&A as we go through here to engage with our audience or with our panelists, which I have to say I'm extremely excited about. We had a minor error on our side, Lulu and myself, that was completely on us. Sharron will not be able to join us today. So in a pinch, we had to call on the Canna fam. And without a doubt, we knew we could get someone to come through. I'm really excited about it. Lulu, I will give you the honor to introduce some of these amazing women, but we're excited for today.
Yeah, super excited. I think this moment has been coming for a very long time. Very honored to have these two amazing women on our show today. When I started in cannabis in New York about 6 years ago, these two were the figureheads that were the pioneers of a lot of things in cannabis in New York. They are both mothers, they are both entrepreneurs, they are both community leaders and activists, and one of the main forces of why cannabis is talking about being legalized in New York as of last night. So fingers crossed. But it's my honor to present Miriam Aristy-Farer and Saki Fenderson. So welcome, ladies. We're super honored to have you.
Thank you. Super honored to be here.
Sorry, guys, I'm trying to move to a better lighted space. My children have chased me to the bowels of the place.
That's okay. We in our prep here, guys, about 15 minutes ahead of this episode, we had Saki finishing making dinner, getting the school project ready, and prepping for this. And I think it's just the perfect symbolism for what both of these women are capable of and do on a daily basis. I was kind of making fun of myself that I can't multitask like them at all. But so we're gonna get into it. Before I get started, I just can't thank our sponsor, Cold Shots, enough. I say this every time, but in this pandemic, we used to have really amazing events where we had a bunch of engaged people. Once we couldn't do that, we had to pivot to digital, and that makes it harder to get sponsors. And especially the way Lulu and I operate, we want to have ethical sponsors that we really align with their ethos and stand behind them. And Cold Shots has been an amazing sponsor. So if you are thinking about starting a business in cannabis, definitely check them out. We'll make sure their link is in the bio, in the chat here. But from that, I want to get started. Miriam, you are kind of a staple uptown. I think you've been really just instrumental. Let's just start with a little introduction to yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here. So who I am, I'm a first generation Latina Dominican, born in Washington Heights, raised in Queens. I mean, Corona, you don't get more Dominican than the Heights and Corona. And I lived in Dominican Republic for a minute. I went to design school. I came back and I live in West Harlem. I'm raising my kids here. I love uptown. I got involved in the schools. Somehow involved in the schools, I ended up in the gardens. I really saw a need for children to understand food, where it came from, and just the whole from seed to table. It just blew my mind how kids living in Manhattan can go their whole life and never put their hands in soil. So I went on a mission to garden and green and counting trees in the neighborhood. And I fell in love with plants and gardening and cannabis, and it all connected. And here I am, the founder of Herbus Plant-Based Body Care. which is a line of skin and body care products and rituals, some CBDs, some not, because, CBD is great, but it's not going to solve everything. I'm a big, fan of plant-based. It's my healing journey. I'm also a medical marijuana patient and a mom. So, when you go to a doctor and you have spinal arthritis and, you have excruciating pain and, I'm a designer, so sitting down started to become difficult to sit down for long periods of time. And the first thing the doctor wanted to do was put patches on me and put me on pills. And I had already been aware of the cannabis as medicine movement, and I said, absolutely not. What are my options with cannabis? He sent me to another doctor, and here I am. 100% pharma free, because as a mom, you can't take pills. Like, I can't be out of it for a minute. Like, I'm sitting here nice and calm right now, but it's like four loads of laundry down. Lunch was taken care of. Like I said, my kids are locked. They're in a room with a warning, like, don't come out. So, as a parent, as a mom, like, for me, nature is it, and as a Dominican, I grew up on all this stuff, on plants and teas. And, as I was looking at my journey as a plant-based business owner, I realized, my parents, when they were in this country, they were immigrants. They didn't understand the language. They couldn't read English. So when they went to stores, processed food was a challenge for them. Like, an apple was an apple, a potato was a potato. So we ate more plant-based, and because they couldn't understand process. So I find it, speed up ahead. I'm in my 50s now, and you look at the impact of processed foods on the Latinx community, on communities of color in general. And it's like, we got to get our people back into healthy eating and healthy foods, because that's where we started. And, for me, making the jump into cannabis advocacy made sense, to leverage my advocacy for children, for public education, for better food. It just made sense for a parent to advocate for cannabis legalization. If I was using it, if I was healing with it, I had to promote it as well. I had to come out of the green closet and speak my truth.
I love it. Coming out of the green closet. So much truth in that background. Saki, how about yourself? I really appreciate that. Amongst many things, you were an activist from very early on. You have done a lot of amazing, really cool things. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you came here.
Unmute. I'm horrible at that unmute part. So you have said less than, because sorry, everything's ringing, and any moment a child's gonna walk in too. But my mother had us marching up and down the northeast seaboard, like, my whole life. And I actually planned my first rally, my first march, when I was 16 years old. I'm from Boston. And so we marched, it was probably anti-apartheid at that time, up to the State House. There's a very horrible picture of me with crazy hair and signs and a bullhorn at 16. So for me, being an advocate is natural. What we're advocating for was not so natural for me. My mother was in recovery. She's been in recovery for over 38 years now. She very much taught us that cannabis was a gateway drug. Addiction runs in our family. Stay away, stay away, stay away. But I came to the plant through, like a lot of us, through a sick family member. So my aunt was in her end of life with cancer, and she was like, I'm gonna try weed. I'm gonna beat this. I'm gonna try everything. I'm gonna try weed. And I was like, yeah, we're gonna get this for you. And I did something very irresponsible. I didn't read about it. I didn't learn about it. I just said, I'm gonna make you some weed food. And we're gonna, you know, get you better. And I actually did the wrong thing because she was on high doses of morphine at the time. I didn't dose the food. I just went willy-nilly and made weed food, you know, and she threw up, and we lost a day at the end of her life because she slept for the whole, you know, rest of the day. And that actually made me want to be more responsible. So I started to learn more about the plant, how it works as food. I actually from there really became concerned about health equity issues, like the fact that there's all this information in California of how it's a medicine, but on this coast, we don't have it that way. We don't learn about it that way. We learn about it like a drug, a gateway drug, something that makes you feel good, you know, something that you get high and stoned on. And then the next part I learned about were the social injustices and the criminal injustices of the plant. And that really spoke to both of those inequities, really spoke to the advocate and activist in me. And it made me reach out and to this cannabis community. But then I realized, hey, I'm sitting in these rooms full of people who don't look like me and who really need this information, and they're not coming into these spaces. So I stepped back and I actually started sharing all of these things I learned in my Brooklyn community and tying it into the holistic part of our society and our wellness. And that's how Tainted Love came to be. I love cooking, and everybody comes to the kitchen. Doesn't matter what family party you have, everybody comes to the kitchen. So food became a way to make the plant accessible to people and create it in a way that was palatable, not a play on words, but palatable and easily translatable for them to understand the plant, their wellness, controlling their wellness. So that really made us more about education because, you know, knowledge is power. That's it.
16-year-old Saki. I wish I could see that back in the day with
Why can't I hear?
What's that?
It's probably me. I think I have to move again to a better signal.
Okay, I'll ask my question to Miriam. So I want to understand a little bit more. What I think is really cool that you didn't touch on yet is that you're actually on the community board. And can you talk to me just before we even talk about cannabis related things, like how did you get involved and what does that entail?
I got involved with my community board, I guess, really like my son is 16 when he was 4, when my oldest son was 4. So over 10 years ago. Well, when I moved, I came back to New York after I lived in Dominican Republic. My parents actually moved back there and I went to Parsons. And when I moved back uptown, I wasn't even aware that the first community that my dad had immigrated to and moved into was Hamilton Heights. Like when he got off the plane in 1962, he had an aunt in the very community that I decided to move into. And that really, it hit me like I came back here without knowing, like I need to give back. Like I can't just be here. And I always gave back. I don't know. I blame it on my Catholic school upbringing. And my parents were also like that you always had to give back and volunteer and do things. So I always did art classes and volunteered, but I had never really gotten involved in politics, school government and stuff like that. But I never really cared to dive into politics. I was more into art and design. And when I moved into West Harlem, it was shocking because the disparity between, just 10, 25 blocks in Manhattan was jarring. And it was very, very clear that it was, in a community of color. It was like things just fell off the planet. And I remember it in the 70s and 80s. You know, I grew up in Queens, so I know how New York was. I grew up in the city, but Manhattan was really something that, to see that level of inequity in such a small strip, like you just take Broadway and you just run straight down. Like now it's not so much, but think in the 90s, it was really early 90s. It was really bad in the 80s. And I just felt like if I'm up here, I have to do something. I have to be involved. You know, there's a reason I came back here. I have to use my voice. I'm bilingual. I have to get involved. And I went to a town hall meeting at the time with Scott Stringer was the Manhattan Borough president. And I asked a question about the schools. You know, I was just like, you know, it's messed up. Like there's the disparity. And they said, well, if you feel that way, why don't you join the community board? And I was like, okay. So I looked it up and I joined the community board. And I never stopped. Like I got involved in the community board. I was, at that point, my son was in the schools. I was on the PTA. I ended up on the school leadership team. Bloomberg was the mayor at the time. He was really attacking the public schools, in particular in communities of color. The school I was in was getting co-located. So I got, like, in a matter of 4 months, I had a really speed intro into city government and Bloomberg's particular form of city government. And I never stopped advocating. I ended up on the community board. I ended up on the Community Education Council. I was appointed by Scott Stringer. I ended up president of that because I realized policy was the government basically gives you the basics. It's like a template. They issue this template and it's the bare minimum. And the communities that have more wits about them, more know-how, more connections, they advocate and they change the policies to benefit them. But the communities where the people do not speak the language, do not have the savvy of engagement, they basically get the bare minimum and they don't know this. Like you have to stand up, you have to ask for more. And community boards, the city actually has, I think it's 59 of them, and people don't realize this. Every single zip code in the city has a community board, and this is it's a volunteer-based board. Nobody gets paid. It's you're not an elected official. You're actually an appointed official. So I'm an appointed elected. Which an appointed official, meaning I actually get called honorary whatever in meetings. We follow parliamentary procedure. What we do is we are part of the city charter. And if you don't know what the city charter is, you should look it up because that's the rule book of how the city is run. It's basically the job description of every city position, every city title, the process of everything. The process of how this city runs is the city charter. And part of the city charter is to have community boards, to bring some level of transparency and democracy and give the people a right in what happens in their community. A big part of what community boards manage and do is the land use and zoning process. This is so important in New York City. This is a real estate town. So think about the importance of land use and zoning. You know, it decides how tall the buildings are going to be in a community, if they're going to bulldoze, the gentrification. All of this comes down to your community board. I'm in Community Board 9, which is West Harlem. It is parts of the Upper West Side, Manhattanville, and Hamilton Heights. So geographically, it's from 158th Street, from St. Nicholas to the river, all the way down to 110th Street, from St. Nicholas to the river. So we liaison as a community board, we liaison with all the city agencies, plus all the stakeholders in the community within that geographic zone. So think about that area. We have Columbia University, we have CUNY, we have St. Luke's Hospital. What else? We have Riverbank State Park. So all of these entities, the community board has committees that meets with them regularly, and annually, the mayor's budget, we actually submit district priorities into the mayor's budget. So I understand the mayor's budget, the process. I have to take trainings on all of this, on parliamentary procedure, on the zoning process, because we review land use applications. Like, we are fighting right now in our particular district. So you have an idea of like the fights that we have to take on, because there's an opioid crisis in the country, and real estate is much cheaper in Harlem and northern Manhattan when the federal government and the state releases funds, because they want to put more centers or want to help people. Well, all these methadone clinics want to start opening up in our district, literally next to a Head Start, next to, we have one methadone clinic that wants to open up next to a public library across the street from a Head Start, next to the Boys and Girls Club of Harlem. So it's like, we don't get paid to fight this, but we then work with community members, block associations, the electeds. We convey meetings, we hold press conferences for things like this. So you never know what's coming at you on a community board, but knowing that you manage the land use and zoning, every community board should be paying attention to cannabis legalization, because this totally plays into where are the dispensaries going. The community boards are all, how you hear a lot of opposition in New York when they talk about homeless shelters, and people show up and you have that's a lot of those people. Sometimes it's the community board. So when you hear organized people in communities, sometimes it's the community board. In our community, we've had a battle. We didn't have a battle, but we negotiated a $30 billion community benefits package agreement with Columbia University because they pulled eminent domain on a huge piece of land in Manhattanville. If you look at 125th Street and 12th Avenue right now, it's a completely brand new Columbia University, their business school, their art school, and a biotech campus, from 125th to 134th. When they pulled eminent domain, the community board and the community, we fought for years, but we ended up negotiating $30 billion in benefits for the community, which is being given out to community-based organizations and, based on a criteria, but you get an idea of the scope of what a community board can impact if they are organized.
Okay, so first of all, I got a DM that our Revel teammate Peter didn't even know you were representing for him, and so he told me to tell you thank you because he's in your area. Secondly, I want to talk about how the community boards and really advocacy groups in general are going to start to play a part with legalization, right? So let's talk about what has happened recently. So if people don't know, over the last 7 years, we have had a bill, the MRTA, which has more or less been the same with a couple of changes. Shout out to Chris Alexander. He's been a guest of the show. He really did a lot of legwork early on. But this came from Senator Liz Krueger, and Assemblywoman Crystal Peoples-Stokes. Okay, so they've gone every year for the past 7 years trying to pass this through the budget. The CRTA came from Governor Cuomo. I want to say 3 years ago. This would be the third year, which is a different bill, similar objectives, but when it comes down to the details, you can see where they really start to diverge. Most people probably on this call, only because I know our audience and I know our panelists, would probably be advocates of the MRTA, and I would say you should be. So in the last 24 hours, we just got some information that the CRTA is no longer in the mix. They have reached a deal on the MRTA with a couple builds and additions. This has not passed, right? Saki's got his fingers crossed. This does not mean we're across the finish line. And even if it does pass, we have a lot of work to do. So first of all, I want to get your initial thoughts on the deal that we know has been reached so far. There's some speculation and there's some details that we can be pretty confident on. Saki, what is your just initial sentiment towards this information?
I'm cautiously optimistic. Besides going through the process of bill making in 3 different states, my home state of Massachusetts, California, and here in my new state of New York, it's not over till the fat lady sings. And I'm sorry, I know that is not an apropos statement, but until things get put into writing, signed, sealed, delivered, it's not ours. Additionally, there's always rollbacks that can happen. So for example, right now, our representatives have pushed really hard to keep criminal justice and social justice reform in the bill. However, on the back end, that means that law enforcement and prosecutors are looking to protect the ways that they've been able to prosecute with cannabis. So they're drafting a bill to counteract the criminal justice reforms. So again, advocacy groups, the work's not done. So just because this bill happens, legalization gets through, there's still work that continues to happen. Regulation now needs to happen. Systems now get it put into place. And again, we are all very lucky to have Miriam fighting for us, because there are very few people on community boards that have an understanding of the plant that she has. And those are the people who are going to make decisions about what dispensaries get open, what consumption spaces can happen, where they can happen, if they can happen. So, you know, we have to still remain very vigilant and engage people in their communities. But more than anything, we're going to have to re-educate ourselves and our communities so that we understand what this plant means and what legalization means.
All right, perfect. That's a perfect kind of intro here, because I'm going to bring it back to Miriam and the community boards. First, just a couple figures here. It's estimated that the New York market will reach $2.5 billion by year 4. Now, anybody that has spent any time in New York knows there's much more money flowing through the legacy markets today, right? And I think a personal thing of On the Revel, we want to make sure that the people that have been making money are able to make money. And so I'm very interested in seeing how this rolls out. Now, there's a handful of licenses that we can be pretty confident are going to be in this new deal based on the MRTA. So you can have a cultivation facility, you can have a processing facility. Processing would be to make products or, you know, vape pens or edibles, whatever. You can own both of those 2 licenses at the same time if you want. There will be retail, which is dispensary, traditional dispensary. You probably cannot have a retail license and one of those other 2 licenses, but there's some exceptions that I'll get to. It looks like we're going to have consumption lounges, which I am extremely happy that were pushed through. We can talk about that as well. I think there will be distribution licenses. So shout out to the people that make your product show up at your door when you ask for it. I think this is an excellent opportunity for some of our community. And then there will also be probably a kind of micro business craft license, which means you actually can be vertically integrated completely, grow, processing, and retail in one license, but you'll have some caps on the size that you can grow to, no pun intended. So first of all, I just want to ask you guys, what's up with the license where you can actually consume? Are you guys an advocate of that? If so, why?
The consumption lounge, absolutely, in New York City. And I tell you from a community board perspective, Community Board 9 passed a resolution supporting the legalization. And, you know, we included a lot of the MRT, the social justice measures. And let me tell you, it was a cat fight to get that resolution passed. And a lot of opposition and concern with the smoke in apartments. New York City is apartments. We also have NYCHA. We have, you know, what's the plan? Right now, NYCHA is run federally, and if you consume marijuana, you lose your lease. So it's very complicated, and you cannot pass legalize in New York and not put into consideration, if you're talking equity and social justice, leave out NYCHA residents. It's just, you can't do that in New York. So consumption is absolutely necessary in New York, and where and how we do that also has to be done properly, because, you know, New York in a minute will put all those consumption lounges in high-end places, and they will become high-end and not available for the people who they were intended. So we have to be really vigilant that consumption lounges are actually for people who are challenged about consuming in their residence.
What are some other elements of this licensing that you guys like or do not like, especially from kind of a community perspective? Like, what are the types of things you want potential licensees to come to your community with?
I think medically, I'm still disappointed with the way medical licenses are set up. They're still very cost prohibitive for small businesses, which means that they're only going to be open for major cannabis corporations. That also leaves a space for it remaining cost prohibitive for patients. The other side of that is, in order for major registered organizations to bring the cost lower, that means they're going to have to be granted some kind of, like, okay, well, can we have recreational at the same space that we have medical? We need to be able to, you know, recover our costs. That then again makes a space for bigger business to have a nice stronghold on our New York industry, right? The other side of that means, look at what just happened last year with quarantine. Cannabis was declared an essential business. In Massachusetts, medical dispensaries were allowed to stay open, recreational were not. So that means that only big business will make money if, you know, heaven forbid, we have another quarantine or some kind of emergency. So I'm a little disappointed if that part still stays as it is, and I suspect that it will. As I said earlier, I'm cautiously optimistic that co-ops, micro licensing, delivery, and consumption spaces, that those licenses still remain, because that gives an opportunity for New Yorkers and small business to thrive, quite honestly, right? However, unfortunately, those things can't thrive if, again, major corporations or major cannabis corporations, I'm gonna just call them what they are, major cannabis corporations are allowed to open before small businesses can get their feet under them.
Yeah, I think
I want to echo that, because Community Board 12 had a forum, their economic development, and there were about 80 people there. And, you know, it's not just licenses, they need training, they need grants, they need support. You know, everyone's focused on the licenses, but we need incubators, we need programs. You know, there's people who are experts on cannabis, but they're not experts on digital marketing, on SEO, on running a digital business, which let's be real, whatever kind of business you're going to run, it's going to be immersed in digital some way, somehow. So the community needs training on how to be entrepreneurs in this space. And they're asking for it.
And that takes time, you know, and I want to say that there are some people who are ready. There are some people who are ready to open their business, but they don't have the paperwork to do it because maybe they are transitioning from a market where they don't have, you know, the proper pedigree, so to speak, to do this. So, you know, there's a couple of concerns when you talk about that. And then let's also talk about rural communities, rural New York, upstate New York. Like we're all here in downstate, but upstate New York is facing some really tight financial restrictions up there. I went to college in Ithaca, New York, and that area, Binghamton, Ithaca, all of that, Elmira, it's primed for this industry. But do they have the capital to get up and running right now? And that's going to take time.
Yeah. So from what I understand, they say that they would like doors to be open for the first retail or adult use retail within a year. So, and they've also said for a year of the bill passing, and they've also said that medical ROs, the 10 licenses that are currently operating in the medical market, are now allowed to have 4 more dispensaries. They currently have 4 each. Now they can have an additional 4, so 8 total, as long as 2 are, I forget what the exact language is, but are in communities that are disproportionately harmed or something like that. Now, what that suggests to me with those 2 bits of information is that the ROs will probably be the suppliers of the first year's worth of product. So however the commission rolls out regulations, they'll probably try to get stores open that are selling product from the ROs. Now, people can debate whether that's the right way to go or not. I would actually take the perspective that is the best way to get up and running quickly. It does give them an advantage for sure. I don't want to see their dispensaries opening before other people's or prioritizing the best products. But that being said, another detail I want to share, that 40% of the tax revenues would go to public education. 20% will go back to drug treatment, prevention, and education. And then the remaining 40% will go to, will be reinvested to communities disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. So great things about the MRTA, right? The CRTA did not have our backs like this, but all of that to be said, it comes down to how the actual rules are written, right? Like it's cool you say you want to invest in my community, but Miriam was already talking about, like, I don't want you to invest in a methadone clinic, right? I want to make sure that the people have a say in what's best for their communities. So I just say that to kind of give some people more information of what's coming. But when you see the rules being written, what are certain ways that we can advocate to make sure that those rules reflect the spirit of the MRTA and what, most of us in New York, at least in the Rebel family, are advocating for?
Wow, the rules. That's where then the city kind of takes over. And, you have to look at what's happening in politics right now. We're shifting a lot of city government is shifting right now. So we have to pay attention to what's happening in the city council, because they might make rules up for the city on cannabis. Yes, the state is going to pass the laws, but in terms of rules, what's the mayor thinking? He issued in 2018 some plan, but it's very pie in the sky. And what I've learned with policy, when you do not define it to the dollar, you leave it open for interpretation, and it's usually interpreted against you. Like if we state 40% is for public education, we need to define the programs, how much those programs would cost. Are they 6-month programs? Are they 3-month programs? Are we targeting, formerly incarcerated? Are we putting a chunk for women? Are we putting a chunk for mothers? I mean, we have to do the work now of defining everything. Remember, Politicians are not the experts. They're just the presenters of our ideas. So now that this is all moving around and we know those percentages, we advocates should be breaking that down, what that looks like. This 20% drug treatment could be interpreted as, well, let's give them a methadone clinic. So you really have to pay attention, and community boards do play a big role in all of this because they're the ones who are going to decide what is placed where. So people need to be hitting up community boards and challenging them. Like, what are you thinking about all this? What are you doing? What's the plan?
Miriam, tell me about that. Get super specific. How do I, as an entrepreneur that is sitting on this Revel webinar, actually go to my community and engage them because I want to start a business there?
So I saw someone's from the Bronx. Someone on the chat is from the Bronx. So you're from the Bronx. You know your zip code. Google your zip code, what community board you're in. Find out what community board you're on. Right now, you got to take the lemon of quarantine and make a lemonade. Everything is on Zoom. You used to have to show up in person to these meetings, and they suck in person. But in Zoom, you can show up, and they're still trying to figure out how to run Zoom. So you get a lot of airtime. I'm telling you, take the lemon of Zoom and make a lemonade. Show up at your community board Zoom meetings right now. Google your zip code, what community board, just say it. Tell your phone, what zip code, what community board is my zip code? And it'll tell you, it has a phone number. There's a district manager. Go to their website. There's a calendar. It usually has a calendar of all the committee meetings. Pick a committee. There's an economic development. You're an entrepreneur. I'm like, shit, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm out of work. I hear they're about to legalize weed. I'm really passionate about this. There's a lot of empty retail spots in my neighborhood. What are you people thinking about this? Like, we could, are we putting dispensaries? Are we going to put businesses to support cannabis? Are you thinking of putting any kind of education center to help me get into this? Like, this is what you show up, and you put this shit on them to figure it out. I've had people show up at my community boards meetings complaining because their windows were changed and cats are falling out. So I have to go investigate all of this. Whatever you bring to them, the community board's job is to investigate it and figure it out, how it impacts the community. This is going to impact education. So parents are going to come out about this. Schools how are they going to re-educate in high schools? The Department of Education better have a plan for high school students. As a parent, you're sitting in the Bronx. I heard they're going to legalize cannabis. How is my son's school going to talk about this? Because I support it. And don't be afraid to say, I support this. They need to hear that you support it.
And Miriam brought up education. And I want to tie that into what you were saying about entrepreneurs on here. There are a few things. One, I'm going to go back a little bit. There is a tool on Facebook called Town Hall. You can type Town Hall in, it'll bring you to Town Hall. You write in your address, it will list everybody from your community police precinct all the way to your federal government people. And you can reach out to them and they actually get this information. So that's a great tool if you're on Facebook, and you can start reaching out. But that means from police all the way to community board in New York City. What is it? SEC, SLC, that's the school community board.
The CEC, Community Education Council.
Community Education Council, CEC.
You got to show up and start challenging them and saying, what are you doing? What are your thoughts? What's the plan?
And a lot of times, yep. And a lot of times what'll happen is the head of that, the chairperson of that will write you back and set up a time to meet with them about that. So that's one thing. Another thing, a lot of times as businesses, especially in cannabis, we think about cultivation. We think about dispensaries. We think about processing and touching the plant. But here's something that's really vital: education. You can start developing plans to help educate, give public information about cannabis to schools, doctors, community centers. There's one of the things I'm excited about consumption spaces is it's an opportune place to spread good education and information about the plant, the program, legalization, business opportunities, all kinds of things. We need to start thinking about ancillary businesses that do not touch the plant, right? So start thinking about, hey, I don't want to open a dispensary, but I'm great at HVAC, installing systems. I need to start getting that out. Co-ops, starting your business, getting your LLC going. These are all things as you know, legalization's right here. And, you know, we need to get our shit together. The tool on Facebook is called Town Hall.
I have a quick question for the group. I actually was on a call a couple hours ago with a girlfriend whose partner has been in the legacy market for a while. And she's very interested in learning how those types of licenses or what type of considerations are being given right now in this upcoming bill towards people in the existing legacy market who want to transition into the legal market. Do you ladies have any thoughts on that?
So the tough part about that is these are all the details that unfortunately come out after legalization happens as regulations are being made. So these are the kind of things that hopefully our social equity chairperson, cannabis social equity chairperson, that position is supposed to make suggestions on which regulations and will be implemented to make these kind of things happen. So I know one of the things that I've been trying to work on is a plan to create language that transitions folks in this place. The difficult part of that is people want tax background. They want all of this other background. And unless we create some sort of forgiveness language in our policy, that makes it difficult, the transitioning person. But there's other non-plant touching elements that are there. The micro businesses are supposed to allow a space for people who are in the legacy market, who are in the black market. For those folks who don't know what legacy market is, it's talking about the pre-existing black market. So folks who are there, those micro licenses and those co-op licenses are supposed to allow them space to enter the market. But again, you got to start, getting your business, for lack of a better word, legitimized if you want to be in this space. And if you don't want to be in this space, you need to be, and I'm speaking about this separately, you need to be prepared for a crackdown that's going to come, because a regulated market cannot survive as long as a pre-existing non-regulated market still exists. So there will be crackdowns, even though the law is asking for there not to be. Somebody's mentioning amnesty programs for the legacy market. And again, this is language that we've been trying to work on, but one of the things that always comes up when we talk about amnesty is, oh, but we don't control the federal government, and if they don't have any taxes, what can we do? If, because federal government. So amnesty is just very difficult sometimes for politicians to sink their teeth into. So again, this is something that we as community people and we as businesses need to fight for.
Yeah, I think I want to make sure that the people in our audience feel empowered to reach out to us as the Revel community. If they have ideas or things that they're trying to push through, we want to support you and connect you with people. Like Lulu and I and Peter have tons of connections throughout this industry. The fact that we were able to grab Saki with 55 minutes on the clock to join us in a pinch is just an example of the relationships that we've been cultivating. But I say that because I actually had a meeting with somebody who had been attending our show for the last couple of weeks. And I understood so much about their business and how this could actually be very legitimized. The important part was to take a step back and to understand what's actually going on. Now, there's people that have great distribution networks. Leverage that. Go for a license. There are people that actually have amazing brands and you have a big consumer base. Another piece that's slept on in the underground is you have consumer data. Like, you know what people are buying. You know what flavors they like. If you can quantify that, that is so valuable, right? There's tons of ways that we can play this game to legitimize. Now, I also understand and respect and appreciate tons of people don't want to. And I appreciate that. And I support them. In Colorado and California, there is still an underground market. Now, that is slowly going to slip away a bit more, but it will never go to zero. It will never go to zero. That's the name of the game. But I do want to make sure that 2 years from now, people in our communities weren't like, damn, I should have applied for that license, right? Like, that's the one thing I don't want. If you decided strategically it doesn't make sense and I'm going to ride this wave, like, do you? But don't do it because you did not pay attention to what's going on right now. You did not reach out and get the education you needed and strategically think, is this the best thing I could do for, me and my family?
And so, I want to echo on that we're also living in a time where in communities of color right now, there's so much support for us to start businesses. Take advantage of all of those programs and all of that support that's out there right now, helping us learn what an return on investment is, what a P&L is, because let me tell you, just because this is cannabis or CBD, if you want to make money, you're going to have, if you want to make money on the books, you're going to have to learn how to do all of these business school things to make money. You're going to have to learn digital marketing if you're in cannabis. You're going to have to learn SEO. You're going to have to learn all of the stuff that a regular business has. So why don't you start taking advantage of that right now and figuring it out with a lot of the incubators that are out there? And I know in Harlem, we have the Small Business Development Center. Every community has small business development centers. New York City has the Small Business Bureau. Like, there's so many, and I say this because I have family in Florida and in other states, and the support network we have in New York City as small businesses is, you can't compare it. I don't know how it is in California, but I know I'm in an incubator right now with people in Texas, and the support we have here in New York is ridiculous. So if you're not banking on that, and in this moment, like it's our time to shine in communities of color. They're giving us opportunities. They're giving us education. And it's not like people from outside, like even people who've made it in our own communities, we recognize we have to grow from within. And even in this cannabis space, New York's going to be a little different. And if we want it to be different, we have to get ready for that. You need to get your business sense, like start understanding how you could trademark stuff. I mean, I trademarked my name. I trademarked Herbus I applied for the trademark in 2017 for a CBD business before CBD was legal, and I got the trademark. You have to be smart. You have to know how to play the game, like how to play your words, there's ways to do things, but you have to start doing it now. Don't wait till it's legal to get off running, because there's a lot of people already getting ready.
And remember, you don't have to touch the plant to be in the business. This legalization is going to open up tons. One of the reasons we pushed for this is because it's going to open up tons more opportunities outside of touching the plant. Marketing, design, package design. People are going to want to be sustainable. Hopefully people are going to want to be ecologically sustainable. But, all of these, oh my goodness, the phone never stops. All of these things are opportunities for us. We need to think creatively, especially for us.
Okay, so we are at about time, but I want to keep it rolling. If you guys don't mind, just staying on a couple more minutes. Those in the Zoom audience, if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll bring you on stage. And if we don't have anybody, while we wait, I want to understand from the two of you, it's crunch time. We're in the final hour. Fingers crossed, pray, do whatever you do to try to push this through. What can we do tactically to push it forward now or after it does legalize? If it does, what should we be doing? Are there certain websites we should be going? Are there certain actions we should be taking specifically? And we can add the links in the chat if you guys dish them out.
I'm always going to push that you follow Drug Policy Alliance. And if you're really into advocacy, is it the Smart Start Coalition? I always confuse it if it's the Start Smart or Smart Start. I know
that the website is smart-ny.com, but I get confused all the time too.
I always like type in both ways because I get it wrong, but those are right now the main advocacy. Is that correct, Saki? That they're kind of, everyone is kind of going under those umbrellas and dividing and conquering. I'm always going to tell you, go challenge your community board because they need to start thinking about all of this. But that's my 2 bits, that you need to challenge your community board levels so that they start escalating it to the electeds and they start figuring out what 40% in public education and what 20% for drug treatment looks like in their community.
I'm going to, of course, agree with her about going to smart-ny.com. But they're a good place to go to get information. A lot of the numbers that you're looking for are there in terms of statistics. And there's also a lot of action tools, meaning, hey, I want to call somebody. I want to get information about this. But in terms of being active, and this is a hard one because I really believe that advocacy has to follow your heart. So the things that you are concerned about, that's where you should be going. If you're looking for information, definitely go to smart-ny.com. Canaware Society, they have good information. I know Canaclusive also likes to put a lot of information up about the bills and what's going on. That's for New Jersey and here in New York. I'm trying to think of who else has that info, but a lot of us really funnel people back to smart-ny.com because they have the statistics. But again, if this is something that's passionate to you and you're a parent, then go to your CEC boards, go to your school boards, go now to your principal of your school. The principal of my middle school, she's like, I see everything you're doing. I want you to come in here and do an education program because we need to start getting our students ready for this, you know? So go where your passion is. If your passion is about food, go to your community garden programs, go to these places and start getting them activated. Say, do you know about this? Are we getting ready for this? Because I feel like we should be getting ready for this. And that's how businesses start. Think about that. How do you think businesses start? It starts from a passion.
I think we got to end it on that note. Like, that was fire. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Shout out to you, Saki, for coming in a pinch. I really, really appreciate it. And just dropping some fire too, like without any prep, just ready to go. I think that's just a test.
It was helpful. I do hope it was helpful because I know I'm super distracted. I have children calling me and I'm like, stop calling.
You're always helpful, Saki. Always.
Definitely. I just want to echo one more time that the fight is not over. We've dropped the links that we can in the chat. We'll try to add them to the YouTube as well. The fight is not over. Keep pushing. And even when it legalizes, there's going to be a lot more work to do. Support the entrepreneurs trying to make it happen. Support the advocates. Hold the people accountable that are making the rules. Like this doesn't stop now. So shout out to everybody for joining. Shout out to the Revel fam. We appreciate you.
I'm also gonna say, email us at hello@ontherevel if you have ideas, if you have things you want to talk about. We're always accessible. Email is the best way to get in touch with us. And Jacoby, should I talk about next month right now?
Yeah, let's do it.
So next month in April, we really want to honor the folks that came from the legacy industry. So we are going to be featuring some really amazing people that have been formerly incarcerated, that are part of the legacy industry, and how they've become part of the legal industry for cannabis as well. So we want to respect and honor everybody that's come before this legal industry, and we want to make sure that people that look like us are remembered and honored and put forward as well. So that's starting April 8th.
All right. On that note, Oscar, the floor is yours. Thank you, everybody.